To start with, load the 3DSMAX project that you want to light. But before you begin lighting your scene, ensure you have a camera set up and that the renderer that you want to use is set. In this example, we'll be using V-Ray. So, let's open the HDR Light Studio connection panel from the menu. Go to Rendering, HDR Light Studio Connection. If you don't see the HDR Light Studio option in the drop-down menu, ensure that the connection was installed correctly. The connection panel opens, and now we can see the HDR Light Studio controls. Let's dock it in the interface. This is where we will start HDR Light Studio. So let's press the Start button. Because there is no lighting environment in our scene, we will be required to create a lighting environment that HDR Light Studio can attach to. We call this Image-Based Lighting Hook, or an IBL hook. Press OK to create a new environment that HDR Light Studio can hook into. HDR Light Studio is now starting while being hooked to the environment that we have just created. Your interface should look something like this. If not, you can reset it by going to Window, Layout, Load, Default, 3DSMAX. Let's put HDR Light Studio to the side for a second. If we go to the Material Editor and look at our scene materials, we can see the environment that we have just created and its textures. It is using a temporary file provided by HDR Light Studio. This will change every time the lighting changes in HDR Light Studio and will keep 3DSMAX up to date with the latest lighting design. Let's go back to HDR Light Studio. You will notice there are two render views. Render View 3DSMAX V-Ray and Render View HDR Light Studio. We will use this one first, so let's press play. We have started interactive rendering in 3DSMAX. The resulting image is shown within HDR Light Studio interface. Now's the time to make our first light. Click on the Presets tab next to the light list to show the preset lights. In this panel, we have a variety of preset lights that we can drag and drop onto our model. The light has been added to the lighting design that is reflecting where the light was dropped on the 3D model. This is because by default, light paint mode is set to reflection. We can see our new light in the light list. We can also see the light added to the canvas here. And of course, the 3DSMAX environment has been updated to use the new live HDRI map from HDR Light Studio. The 3DSMAX V-Ray preview render is also updated and is using the new lighting. We can see that the light paint tool is active in the toolbar within the render view, 3DSMAX V-Ray. We can use this tool to click on the 3D model to reposition our light. The light has moved on the HDRI map and the new HDRI map is sent to 3DSMAX for our preview render to update. This is a very interactive way of lighting your shot. However, if you find that there is a delay of more than a second or so after clicking to move your light and see the updated rendered result, the process will be slow and tedious. This is where the second render view comes handy. We can use HDR Light Studio's built-in renderer to speed up the lighting process. So let's press play and import. By default, this will mean that 3DSMAX exports its scene as a temporary Alembic file, which is loaded and rendered in this view. A simple shader is used to preview the light and reflections. It's important to ensure that the camera view in HDR Light Studio's render view matches with the 3DSMAX V-Ray render view. If you needed to open this view for a more interactive lighting experience, use this view for light paint where clicking and dragging is supported. It's really fast and interactive. If the 3DSMAX V-Ray render view is still so slow that it's of little benefit, use the pause and play button to stop and resume rendering to produce test renders from time to time. So far, the light we have created is on the HDRI map. With a single setting, this light can be removed from the HDRI map and created in 3D space in 3DSMAX, mapped with the HDR content from HDR Light Studio. Let's enable the Area Light checkbox in the Light Properties panel for the selected light. The light in the light list now gets a suffix, area light, and is in yellow, clearly showing which lights are area lights. Although this view hasn't changed much, the map that is shared with the render view in 3DSMAX doesn't include this light anymore. This light is now a 3D light that can be moved in space using the smart dolly slider to control its distance. We can still control the light by clicking on the model to position it, just like any other light. Going back to 3DSMAX, we can see the area light that we have just created in the Scene Explorer, and if we click on Material Editor and find our area light in the Scene Materials, we can see that they have a texture that is coming from HDR Light Studio. Let's go back to HDR Light Studio. I can duplicate any of those lights by pressing Ctrl D whilst the light is selected, and then position it someplace else. With a single click of a button, I can return them to the HDRI map by unchecking the Area Light checkbox in the Light Properties panel. And now they are part of the HDRI map again. If we go back to 3DSMAX, we can see that the area lights are no longer in the Scene Explorer. Let's return to HDR Light Studio once again and position those lights more nicely. I can change the brightness of a light, the size, and any other settings like the colour, for example. The final step would be to press the HDR button from the toolbar on the left and render the high-quality HDRI map file on disk. We do this because as of now, the HDRI map design in the HDR Light Studio is shared with 3DSMAX as a low-resolution image. So let's choose our resolution. If you had any area lights in your lighting design, you can choose the resolution of those here. Okay, we're good. So let's click on Browse and choose the file name and location of our final HDRI map. Press Render. HDR Light Studio will now calculate the final high-quality HDRI map and save it to disk. It will then tell 3DSMAX to use these new files on disk. Now if we look at the environment and its texture, it's using that file from disk. At this point, we can stop HDR Light Studio connection and save your 3DSMAX project. This is like any other 3DSMAX scene and can be rendered. If we decide we want to edit the lighting, we can simply do so by pressing Start, hitting OK, and HDR Light Studio will restart. Its lighting project is embedded in the 3DSMAX scene. So when HDR Light Studio starts, it will load the project where we left off. If we press play in the render view 3DSMAX V-Ray again, we can see that the view is being lit with this lighting. We can make further changes, so let's say we change the colour of one of these lights. And re-render our HDRI map. Now if we look at the environment's texture has been updated to use our new file on disk. And we can now stop the HDR Light Studio connection once more and save our 3DSMAX project. So this concludes the tutorial of how to use HDR Light Studio with 3DSMAX. Thank you for watching.